I was 9 years old when I realized something was wrong with how my dad treated us, but I didn't have the words for it yet. It started small, like most terrible things do. He'd come home from work already angry, slamming doors, yelling about every little thing that wasn't perfect. The house wasn't clean enough. Dinner wasn't ready on time. My homework was spread across the kitchen table. Me and my little brother were playing too loudly. My mom would rush around trying to fix whatever was making him mad. While me and my brother Jake, who was only 6, would hide in our room. We had this game called Statue, where we'd freeze completely still, hardly breathing when Dad got like that. Because moving or making noise would attract his attention, I got really good at Statue could stay frozen for over an hour. Sometimes my legs would cramp up, but I wouldn't move because moving meant Dad would notice me, and noticing meant yelling. Or worse, Jake wasn't as good at staying still. He was just a little kid after all. Sometimes he'd sneeze or shift his weight, or just get tired of being scared. And that's when I'd step in, distract Dad, somehow take the attention off Jake. I remember the first time I realized other families weren't like ours. I was at my friend Emma's house for dinner. Her dad came home late from work. Looking tired, I tensed up, waiting for the explosion, but he just kissed Emma's mom on the cheek, ruffled Emma's hair, and asked us what we were playing. No yelling, no slamming things, no making everyone walk on eggshells. I was so confused I kept waiting for him to snap, but he never did. When Mom picked me up that night, I asked her in the car why Emma's dad was so different from ours. She gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white and said, "Some people just have bad tempers. Honey, your father works very hard and we need to be understanding." That became her answer for everything. We need to be understanding. He's tired, he's stressed, he's having a rough time at work. The rules in our house changed constantly depending on Dad's mood. One night, laughing during dinner was fine. The next, it would set him off. We never knew what version of him we'd get, and that unpredictability was the worst part. There was this one time when I was 10, Jake had gotten a good grade on his spelling test, and was so excited to show Dad, thinking maybe this would finally make him proud. Dad had seemed in an okay mood when he got home, so Jake ran up to him waving his test paper, but Dad had just swatted it away without even looking at it. Jake's face just crumpled, and I felt this burning in my chest, this anger I didn't know what to do with. I picked up the test paper, told Jake how proud I was of him, took him to our room, and we played with his action figures until bedtime. That night, I heard Mom and Dad fighting. Mom's voice saying he's just a little boy trying to make you proud, and Dad's voice getting louder and louder until there was a crash. The next morning, Mom had a bruise on her arm, she said. She bumped into the counter. I was 10, but I wasn't stupid by the time I was 12. I got good at managing him. I could read his moods the second he walked in. I knew which nights to grab Jake and disappear, which nights to be extra helpful, which nights just to stay perfectly still and hope he didn't notice us. I became my brother's protector. I'd distract Dad when he started focusing on Jake. I'd take blame for things Jake did. I'd warn Jake when Dad was in a mood. I developed this sixth sense, could tell from the way Dad turned his key in the lock what kind of night it was going to be. The heavy, quick turn meant anger, get out of sight. The slow, deliberate turn meant he'd been drinking, be extra quiet. The fumbling with the lock meant he was really drunk, which was actually better because he'd just pass out. But the thing about living that way is that you think it's normal. You think every kid spends their time calculating, risk managing adults' emotions, protecting their siblings. One time in 6th grade, we had this assignment to write about our heroes. I wrote about my mom, how she always made sure we had dinner, how she worked so hard to keep the peace, how she protected us. My teacher, Mrs. Abernathy, had given me this sad look when she read it, asked me to stay after class, asked some questions about home, but I knew the rules. What happens at home stays at home. I lied, said everything was fine, got really good at lying actually, honor roll student, always smiling, always helpful. No one suspected what was really going on except maybe Mrs. Abernathy, who kept finding reasons to give me extra snacks, kept Jake's and my winter coats at school so we'd never forget them, somehow always had an extra set of supplies when we needed them. Then one day when I was 13, everything changed. I was at school in math class when the principal came to get me. Jake had been taken to the hospital. I remember the panic that flooded through me as the principal drove me there. Her face grim, refusing to tell me what happened at the hospital. I found my mom sitting in the waiting room crying. She wouldn't look at me, wouldn't speak. Nurses kept giving us these sad looks. Finally, a doctor came out and told us Jake had fallen down the stairs and hit his head. He was okay, but he had a concussion and would need to stay overnight. I knew immediately Jake hadn't fallen. He was the most careful kid I knew because being careful kept you safe in our house. When they finally let me see him, I asked what really happened. His eyes darted to Mom, who was talking to a nurse outside the room. Jake whispered. Dad got mad because I spilled juice on the carpet. He pushed me. I tried to catch myself, but I fell down the stairs. A cold feeling washed over me. I'd been at school. I wasn't there to protect him. This was my fault. But then a woman in a suit walked in, introduced herself as Mrs. Chen from Child Protective Services. She said they needed to ask Jake some questions alone. I was sent back to the waiting room where I found my mom arguing with two police officers, watching Mom's face as she frantically tried to explain away what happened. I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear when the police asked to speak with me. My mom grabbed my arm so hard it left marks and whispered, "Remember what we always say. What happens in our house stays in our house." That's when I realized she knew. She'd always known. And she'd never tried to stop it when the officer asked me what happened. I froze like I was playing statue voice caught in my throat, thoughts racing. I looked at my mom's pleading eyes, looked at the door to Jake's room, and made a decision that would change everything. I told the truth. I started talking and couldn't stop. Told them about the yelling, the pushing, the constant fear. I told them about the time Dad had grabbed Jake by the arm so hard it left bruise marks in the shape of fingers. I told them about Mom's accidents, the bruises, the time she had to wear sunglasses inside for a week. I told them about how we weren't allowed to have friends over, how Dad controlled when we ate, when we slept, when we could speak. The officer, a woman with kind eyes, named Officer Lopez, just kept nodding, writing things down, occasionally asking a clarifying question, but mostly just letting me talk. It was like a dam had broken after years of holding it all in. All these secrets came flooding out. I told her about the statue game, about my job protecting Jake, about the way Dad would sometimes lock us in the closet when we were too much to handle. I told her how Mom always made excuses, always said it wasn't that bad, always convinced us that this was just how families were. When I finally stopped talking, Officer Lopez put her hand on mine and said, "You're very brave, and this isn't your fault." Those simple words hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear them. The next few hours were a blur. Mom was crying. The officers were taking notes. Mrs. Chen was nodding. A doctor examined me, found old injuries I'd forgotten about, a hairline fracture in my wrist that had never been treated from when Dad yanked me up by my arm, bruises in various stages of healing on my back and legs, a burn mark on my shoulder from when I'd accidentally bumped into Dad's cigarette. They took pictures, documented everything, asked me more questions. I just felt numb, like I was floating outside my body, watching all this happen to someone else. Eventually, a police officer told Mom she needed to come to the station. She started screaming that we were liars, that we were trying to ruin the family, that Dad would be so angry when he found out what we'd done. That reaction told the officers everything they needed to know that night. Jake and I didn't go home. We went to an emergency foster placement, a house with an older couple who spoke softly and asked, before they hugged us. The woman, Mrs. Reynolds, showed us our rooms with real beds, not mattresses on the floor like at home. She gave us clean pajamas that actually fit and told us we were safe here. I remember lying in bed that night feeling like I could finally breathe, but also terrified of what would happen next. Would Dad find us? Would Mom talk her way out of this? Would anyone believe us in the end? The next morning, we met a different social worker who explained Dad had been arrested. Mom was under investigation and we were going to stay with the Reynolds for a little while. Jake kept asking when we could go home. I didn't know how to tell him I never wanted to go back there. Over the next few weeks, we learned a lot of new words for what had happened to us. Abuse, neglect, enabler, words that gave shape to our experiences. We had to talk to more people, police detectives, counselors, doctors who documented our injuries, took statements, asked the same questions over and over. Meanwhile, Mom had been given a choice, us or Dad. She chose Dad. That hit me harder than any of Dad's blows ever had. I'd spent my whole life believing she was just another victim like us, that she was trapped too, that she did her best, but when given an actual chance to protect us, she didn't. The social worker told us they'd found our grandmother, my mom's mom, who we hadn't seen since we were very little. She wanted to take us in. Apparently, Dad had cut off contact with most of Mom's family years ago, part of the isolation that we'd thought was normal. We went to court. Dad tried to claim we were making it all up, that we were problem children trying to hurt him, that Mom would vouch for him. But the evidence was overwhelming, the medical reports, the teacher statements from people like Mrs. Abernathy, who had suspected something wasn't right, even testimony from neighbors who had heard the yelling and crashes through our thin apartment walls. The judge ruled we would live with our grandmother and there would be a restraining order against both our parents. I still remember Dad's face when they led him away, fury, like I'd never seen before. He looked at me and mouthed, "Traitor." And despite everything, I still felt this crushing guilt. We moved in with our grandmother that weekend. She lived in a little house with a garden 3 hours away from our old town. Grandma Ruth, as she asked us to call her, cried. When she saw us, wrapped us in these gentle hugs, said she'd tried to stay in touch. But Mom and Dad had changed their number, moved without telling her she'd been looking for us for years. She became our guardian, and slowly we started to heal. The first week at Grandma Ruth's house was strange. She kept telling us to help ourselves to food whenever we were hungry. We didn't have to ask permission. First, she didn't yell when Jake accidentally knocked over a lamp. She just cleaned it up and asked if he was okay. She talked to us like we were real people, Not burdens or problems to be dealt with, but years of conditioning. Don't disappear overnight. We both still flinched at loud noises, still asked permission for basic things like using the bathroom or getting a glass of water. The nightmares didn't stop right away. Jake would still freeze completely still when he heard a loud noise. I still found myself automatically cleaning before an adult came home. We both still flinched when someone raised their hand near us one night about 2 weeks in. I woke up to Jake screaming from a nightmare. I ran to his room on autopilot, ready to cover his mouth so he wouldn't wake Dad up. Instead, I found Grandma Ruth already there, holding him, rocking him back and forth, telling him he was safe, that no one would hurt him here. She looked up, saw me standing there terrified in the doorway, and extended her arm, inviting me into the hug. I hesitated, then practically collapsed against her. It was the first time I could remember being held like that by an adult, like I was precious, not a nuisance. We started therapy multiple times a week. Jake with a child psychologist specializing in trauma, me with a therapist who worked with teens who'd been through abuse. At first, I didn't want to talk, didn't see the point in rehashing everything. We'd already escaped, but slowly, my therapist, Dr. Martinez, helped me understand what had happened. Wasn't normal, wasn't our fault. I realized I'd been parenting Jake for years, taking on responsibilities no child should have, trying to protect him the way Mom should have been protecting both of us. I learned about hypervigilance, how I was always scanning for threats, always on edge, always trying to anticipate the next crisis. I learned that my anxiety, my constant need to be perfect, my fear of making mistakes weren't personality traits, they were trauma responses. School got better too. We enrolled in a new school where nobody knew us as the abused kids, the ones with the dad in jail. Now that I wasn't spending all my energy worrying about home, I could actually focus. My grades improved. I made more friends. I even joined the swim team. Jake started smiling again, a real smile, not the careful one he used at home to avoid trouble. He made friends too, stopped checking with me before he did anything. But there were still hard days. Days when I'd get a bad grade and have a panic attack, convinced punishment was coming. Days when Jake would revert back to statue when stressed. Grandma Ruth was patient through all of it, never pushed us to get over it, never made us feel bad about our struggles. She encouraged our interests, bought me books when she noticed I liked reading, got Jake art supplies when he showed interest in drawing for the first Christmas at her house. She asked us what we wanted the first time anyone had ever done. That Jake asked for a bike. I asked for a lock for my bedroom door. She got us both what we asked for, and never once made me feel weird about needing that lock. Even though we both knew she would never enter without permission, she understood somehow what most adults didn't. That healing isn't linear. That trust has to be rebuilt slowly over time. 4 years passed this way, growing, healing, learning what normal actually meant. We had to see our parents in court a few times. Dad went to jail for child abuse. Mom got supervised visitation, but we refused to see her every so often. There'd be some new legal thing, hearing a form to sign. Grandma Ruth handled most of it, shielding us as much as possible. Mom would send letters, cards on our birthdays, Christmas presents that Grandma would ask if we wanted to open. At first, I threw them away unopened, but eventually curiosity got the better of me. They were all the same. I'm sorry, I miss you. It wasn't that bad. Other kids have it worse. I did my best. I didn't know what else to do. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. No real understanding, just excuses and self-pity. I'd read them, feel angry, then sad, then nothing, and throw them away. Meanwhile, our lives kept moving forward. I got my driver's license, joined more clubs at school, started thinking about college. Jake was thriving in middle school. Discovered he had a talent for art, became known for his detailed drawings. He still had bad days, would still wake up from nightmares sometimes, but they became less frequent. I started dating. My first boyfriend at 16. Robbie from my chemistry class. I was terrified of introducing him to Grandma. Ruth convinced somehow she'd hate him or he'd hate her, or something would go wrong. Instead, she made his favorite cookies, asked him about his interests in a genuine way, made him feel welcome watching them talk. I realized this was what normal looked like. This is what I'd missed out on for so long. On my 17th birthday, I got a letter from Mom that was different. She wrote that she had left Dad, that she was in therapy, that she understood now how she had failed us, that she wanted another chance. I didn't respond, but I kept the letter. A few months later, she showed up at one of my swim meets. I saw her in the bleachers, didn't acknowledge her, but I knew she was there. She came to a few more over the next months, never approached, just watched from a distance. Part of me wanted to confront her, ask her why she was there now, when she hadn't been there when we needed her. Another part was just tired of being angry at her. Jake was more adamant, didn't want to see her, didn't want to hear about her, said she'd made her choice and he'd made his. I understood, respected his decision, but something in me needed closure. some kind of resolution. After I graduated high school with honors, Grandma threw a party. She asked if I wanted to invite Mom. I surprised myself by saying yes. The party was small, just a few friends from school. Some of Grandma's friends who'd known us since we moved in. Mom came, looked smaller, somehow brought a cake. She'd made herself, didn't try to hug me, just said she was proud of me. It was awkward. No one quite knew how to act around her. She clearly felt out of place towards the end of the party. She asked if we could talk for a minute. We sat on Grandma's porch swing, silent for a bit. Finally, she said, "I know, sorry isn't enough, but I am sorry I failed you both." I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't, but I did ask why. Why had she stayed? Why had she chosen him over us? She didn't have a good answer. Said she'd been scared, said she'd convinced herself it wasn't that bad, said she'd been raised in a similar home, thought it was normal. None of it excused what she'd done, but for the first time I saw her as a deeply flawed person, not the monster I'd built up in my head. I told her I was going to college, would be studying psychology, wanted to understand what had happened to our family, maybe help other kids like us. She nodded, said I'd be good at. That asked if she could help with tuition. I said, no. Grandma and my scholarships had it covered. I didn't forgive her. Not then, maybe not ever, but I let her be there during my freshman year of college. I finally felt free, like my life was truly my own. For the first time, I had a wonderful roommate who knew some of my story and was respectful of my boundaries. I joined clubs, made friends, dated a few people. Jake was thriving in high school, now taking advanced art classes, already getting interest from art schools despite only being a sophomore. I still felt responsible for him, probably always will, but I was learning to let him stand on his own during my second year of college. I got a call from Grandma. Dad was getting out of prison early for good behavior. The panic I felt was immediate. Jake called me that night, scared that Dad would try to find us. I made a decision, then drove home the next day. Sat down with my brother, who wasn't so little anymore. And Grandma, I told them I wanted to see him just once, not to forgive him, but to look him in the eye as an adult, not a scared kid. Grandma worried, but respected my choice. Jake said he wasn't ready, maybe would never be ready. I told him that was okay. The prison was cold, sterile. I waited in a room with other visitors, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. And then there he was, thinner, grayer, but still him still. The man who had dominated my nightmares for years. He sat across from me, tried to smile. I didn't smile back for a moment. I was 9, again terrified of saying the wrong thing, of making him angry. But I took a deep breath, reminded myself I was an adult now. He couldn't hurt me anymore. He started with excuses, said prison had been hard, said he'd found God, said he'd always loved us in his way. I let him talk, watched his face until he ran out of words. Then I said my piece. I told him I remembered everything, every push, every threat, every time he made Mom cry, every time Jake and I hid in our closet, every bruise, every lie we told teachers about our injuries. I told him about the statue game, how Jake and I would freeze for hours hoping he wouldn't notice us, how no child should have to do that. I told him I was getting my degree in psychology, that I understood now he'd been abused too as a child, that cycles of violence can be passed down. But then I told him the most important part, that understanding why he did it didn't excuse what he did. That explanation isn't justification. I told him I knew now that parents are supposed to protect their children, not hurt them, that his job was to keep us safe, and he had failed completely at the most basic task of parenthood. I told him Jake was thriving now that we both were, that Grandma had shown us what real love looked like. He tried to interrupt, started to get angry. Like the old days, I held up my hand, and he stopped mid-sentence, that small gesture, showing me how much power I now had in this relationship. I told him we would never have a relationship, that this meeting wasn't reconciliation, it was closure. I stood up, said everything I needed to say, and walked out. The strangest thing I felt, nothing, no fear, no anger, not even satisfaction, just emptiness. Like I'd finally put down a heavy weight I'd been carrying for years. I called Jake, immediately told him it was over, that Dad couldn't hurt us anymore, that we were free that night. I dreamed of our old house for the first time in years, but in the dream, I wasn't small and scared. I was my current size, my current age. I walked through the rooms, feeling nothing but pity for the man who had once seemed so terrifying. I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. Over time, I've come to understand that both my parents failed us in different ways. Dad, through active abuse. Mom, through passive acceptance. I've learned that parents aren't perfect, that they make mistakes, but there's a difference between normal parental mistakes and systematic abuse. I've learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about who makes you feel safe, who builds you up instead of tearing you down. My relationship with Mom slowly evolved. She kept coming to important events, kept reaching out, Eventually, Jake agreed to see her too. We'll never be close, never have the mother-children relationship we should have had, but we've reached a kind of peace. She remarried a few years ago to a quiet, kind man who treats her well. She volunteers at a women's shelter now, trying to help others leave abusive relationships. Sometimes I wonder if she does that out of genuine growth or guilt. Either way, at least something good is coming from her experience. Grandma Ruth passed away last year at 83. It hit both of us hard. She'd become more mother to us in 9 years than our actual mother had been in 13. Her funeral was packed with people whose lives she'd touched. Neighbors, former students from her teaching days, friends from church, all with stories about her kindness, her generosity. Mom came to the funeral, stood in the back, looking lost. Jake actually approached her first, surprised us both by asking if she wanted to sit with us. Grandma left us her house and savings. She left us with so much more than material things, though she left us with a template for how to be good people, how to break the cycle. Jake finished art school. His work has been featured in galleries. He specializes in pieces about childhood trauma and healing. His most famous piece is called Statue, a sculpture of 2 children frozen in position, the fear evident in every line of their bodies. It won several awards, was purchased by a museum. He's engaged now to a wonderful woman who understands his past, doesn't push when he has bad days. I finished my PhD work with children who've experienced abuse, trying to give them what Mrs. Chen and Officer Lopez gave us, a way out, a chance for something better. I run a practice specializing in childhood trauma, help train police and social workers to recognize signs of abuse, advocate for better laws protecting children. I'm married to someone who grew up in a loving, stable home, who had to learn about the effects of trauma, who sometimes still doesn't fully understand, but always tries to. We're expecting our first child next month, a girl who will never know what it's like to play statue, who will never fear a door opening, who will be loved unconditionally. Sometimes I still wake up from nightmares, heart racing, but my husband knows to give me space, not to touch me, until I'm fully awake. Back in the present, I've had to learn to parent myself in many ways, to give myself the compassion and understanding my parents never could. The hardest lesson was learning that their failure wasn't my fault, that no child deserves abuse, that I wasn't responsible for protecting Jake. That was their job. I still catch myself sometimes anticipating anger when I make a mistake, or feeling guilty for taking up space, old habits from a frightened childhood. But those moments get fewer. Every year last month, I was helping a 10-year-old boy in my practice. He asked me through tears if all dads hit their kids. I told him the truth, that real parents protect their children, that what was happening to him wasn't normal, wasn't his fault, and most importantly, wasn't forever. I saw in his eyes what I must have looked like all those years ago, and I promised myself I would do for him what should have been done for me much sooner. I reported his case personally, made sure he was placed with a loving foster family, check on him regularly. He's starting to smile more, to trust again, to believe that adults can be safe. Dad died last year. Liver failure after years of drinking, never sought help, never truly acknowledged what he'd done. I didn't go to the funeral. Neither did Jake. Mom went, stood alone by the grave. I wonder what she thought, looking down at the man who had shaped all our lives in such terrible ways. Sometimes people ask me if I hate my parents. I don't think hate is the right word. I feel sad for the childhood Jake and I lost, for the relationship we could have had with parents who actually knew how to parent. But mostly, I feel grateful that we got out, that we found Grandma, that we had each other. The realization that your parents are bad at parenting isn't a single moment. It's 1,000 small moments accumulating until you can't ignore the truth anymore. It's realizing that fear isn't respect, that love shouldn't hurt, that family secrets usually protect the wrong people. It's understanding that you deserved better. And eventually it's knowing that even though they failed you, you don't have to repeat their mistakes. That's where I am now, breaking the cycle, doing the work my parents never did, learning to be whole despite their best efforts to break me. Jake and I talk about it sometimes, what kind of parents we might be someday. The things we do differently, the childhood we'd want to give our kids, and in those conversations I feel a kind of healing. Neither of us will ever completely forget what happened, but we're not defined by it anymore. We're defined by what we've built since then, the people we've become, despite them, not because of them. That night in the hospital when I told the truth, when I broke the code of silence that had protected my parents for years, I couldn't have imagined the life I have now. There were so many dark days after days when I missed Mom, despite everything. Days when I wondered if reporting Dad had been a mistake. Days when the guilt was overwhelming. But looking back, I can see the straight line from that terrified 13-year-old girl to the woman I am today. I know now what good parenting looks like. It looks like Grandma Ruth asking before entering our rooms, respecting our boundaries, celebrating our successes. It looks like the Reynolds who took us in, that first night, speaking softly, moving slowly, making sure we felt safe. It looks like our teachers who noticed something was wrong and reported it, Even when we denied everything, it looks like Mrs. Chen and Officer Lopez who believed us when we finally told the truth. Good parenting is protection, love boundaries, consistency, safety things so basic every child should have them, yet so many don't. What made me realize my parents were bad at parenting was seeing the alternatives, seeing how other adults treated children with respect and kindness. And what makes me know I'll be a good parent despite my upbringing is that I've learned from their mistakes. My daughter will never know what it's like to be afraid in her own home. She'll never doubt that she's loved. She'll never have to protect someone else because the adults in her life failed her. That's how you break the cycle. That's how you turn a tragedy into redemption, by remembering everything and choosing to be different.